Hi everybody, this video is going to cover creating outcome trees to help you solve probability problems. Up until this point, a lot of our problems have had one movement. So like you spin the spinner once, or you roll the dice once, or you flip a coin once. These problems are going to be a little bit more complicated. For example, the problem I want you to think about right away is imagine we're on a new game show, and in the game show there are 3 rounds. We have flashing lights and you have to pick the right one. We have 3 marbles and you have to get lucky and grab the right marble, and then you have to flip a coin and get it the right side. So hypothetically, in our game, if you needed to win the grand prize by getting the red light, the purple marble, and then a tails, the question is, how difficult would that be? And if you're on the game show, would it be worthwhile to bet on the prize even if it's really hard to achieve? And that's what we're going to look at today in this video. So as we go through these questions here, love that one. That one's my favorite. So I'm going to get rid of the webcam here. So problem 1 says that we want to flip a coin 2 times. What are the possible outcomes? Well, if we think about when we're flipping the coin, okay, flip 1 is heads or it's tails. Those are the only 2 options. When we're doing flip 2, it's also only heads or tails. So we're going to start doing something called an outcome tree or an outcome table. And that's what we're going to work on for the rest of this video. It's an outcome tree or an outcome table. So when we're creating the outcome tree, you always want to start at the top with what we call event 1. So event 1 is we flip a coin and the coin has 2 possible outcomes. We have heads and we have tails for event 1. Event 2 then also has 2 possible outcomes, except off each of these outcomes, the tree branches off, hence why we call it a tree. And then for this first heads, we have heads and tails again, or over on this tails, we have heads and then we have tails again as well. So that is the outcome tree that we're creating for this problem. The table is then we write out all of the possible outcomes in a table format. So our first outcome is we get heads on the first roll and we get heads on the second roll. The second outcome is we get heads and then we get tails. So this is number 1. This is number 2. Heads and then tails. This would make this outcome 3, which would be tails and then heads down there. And then finally, outcome 4 would be tails and then tails. So creating the outcome tree here on the left, creating the outcome table here on the right. And the question says, what are all the possible outcomes? There are the 4 total outcomes. And that is the beginning of this video. And we're going to get into some more difficult problems next. Our next question is going to cover if we flip that coin 3 times instead of twice. And then it asks the question, what are the odds that you roll at least 2 heads? So to speed us up a little bit, I already drew the outcome tree. Now we have to create the outcome table, which means for the first item, we have heads, heads, heads. That's right here. Therefore, the first item is heads, heads, heads. Item 2 is heads, heads, tails, if we follow it down the tree. Item 3 is here. So we go heads, tails, heads. Item 4 is heads, tails, tails. That's right here. Item 5 now is tails, heads, heads. Item 6 is tails, heads, tails. Item 7 is tails, tails, heads. And item 8 is tails, tails, tails. So we had 8 total outcomes that were possible here. These 8 that I just wrote down. So the question says, what are the odds that you roll at least 2 heads? Well, we know that the odds have to be out of 8 total, that there are 8 total. So how many of them have at least 2 heads? That means this one has 3 heads, 2 heads, 2 heads, 2 heads, and that's it. So that would be 4 of the 8, or 1/2, or 50% of them. All 3 of those answers would be correct for this problem. That if you flip a coin 3 times, what are the odds you roll at least 2 heads? That's 4 of the 8 outcomes, and that would be the correct answer. And this is how you use outcome tables. And now we're ready to answer that game show problem. So we're now on to that game show problem where in order to win, we needed red light, then the purple marble, and then we needed to flip a tails on the coin. And we want to figure out what are the odds of all 3 of those things happening. So that means that we have 3 events. So event 1 is either a red light, a green light, or a blue light. Then off each of these, we have 2 events. So that means we'll have white, yellow, or purple for marbles, and each of these will have 3. And then off each of these, our final event is going to be heads or tails. So one of the tricks to figure out total outcomes is you multiply the number of total outcomes for each of the individual events. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 18. So there are going to be 18 total events. And to save us time, I wrote them out for us over here. Okay. So if you notice, we have the red light, then white marble, yellow marble, purple marble, and then heads and tails. And at the bottom, I wrote our outcome table. So those are all 18 possible outcomes: red, white heads, red, white tails, and so on. So I'd like you to pause the video, create this outcome table, because this is about as hard as we'll ever get in this section. And when you're ready, unpause it, and then we'll talk about the answer to our question. So the question said, first prize is we need red, purple, and then tails to win. What are the odds? Well, we know that there are 18 possible total events. So it's got to be something out of 18 events. Okay? So if we go and look, how many of them have red, purple, and then tails? And I only see one of them has red, purple, and then tails. Therefore, there is 1 out of 18 that will help us win this event. So 1 out of 18 chance is about 5 6/10%. Not much, as it turns out. Very, very unlikely. If you played the game 18 times, you'd win once, which means that in the course of this game, we'd have to be very careful to make sure we're not going overboard with our individual goal here. Now, there is a second and a third prize in this event. So second prize is red, then purple, then anything for the coin. So what are the odds of this happening? Well, we know that there are 18 possible events still, and we need red, then purple, then anything. So let's go back to our chart. So I want red, then purple, then anything, which means that it'll be this event and this event, which will be 2 out of 18, which is about 11%. So a little bit more likely. So if you don't get first prize, second prize, you get about 11% chance. So not great, but definitely not horrible. Okay, so red, then purple, then anything. So third prize is red, then anything, and then anything. So let's go back and look here. How many of our events have red, then anything, then anything? Well, that means that all 6 of these events have red and then something else, which means we have 6 out of 18 or a total of 33% for this problem. And that right there is the video that covers how to create outcome trees and outcome tables. For all of P3, you are required to make the outcome tree and the outcome table for every problem. Then P4, we're going to learn some strategies to solve without doing that. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know.